Section 4, biology, ecology and cultivation, the tree, the relationships and how to grow this plant. So, Yopo is one of the strangest plants I've come across because he has such a number of unique ecological relationships. In other words, he's not really reliant on human beings at all. His mates are in the plants and animals that live on him. So he's unusual in that he does his own nitrogen fixation. So like all members of the Fabergé family, Yopo forms symbiotic relationships with nitrogen-fixing bacteria in its roots nodules, literally fertilising its own soil and enriching the surrounding ecosystem. So like I said, he's very much a set and forget plant. He's also makes an amazing neighbour, so any other plant that grows around a Yopo tree is always vibrant, always well fed and always well watered because he shares his resources with his neighbours. He does not compete. He's also mindful in that if a plant needs additional light, he will literally part his leaves open so that his neighbour can bask in the sunlight. I've never seen a tree so alive. He also has a relationship with stink bug defenders. So stink bugs are perfectly camouflaged against his mottled and warty bark, and they're very difficult to see unless they're moving. And the amount of times I've gone to put my head up against the tree and hit one of these stink bugs and it's squirted me is kind of funny. So I always kind of rub my hand first in case they're there. But basically what it looks like is that it's using chemical secretions as a natural defence. So basically to keep pests away, borer worms away and marsupials away from the tree, which I find fascinating as well. They mate on that tree, they live on that tree, and he feeds them nectar from that tree in basically as a payback for the work that they do. He also forms a symbiotic relationship with ants, and this is probably one of the most fascinating parts of them as well. So in exchange for nectar, the ants conduct regular patrols over the entire tree hunting pests. So more remarkably, in cultivation, I observed ants digging water reservoirs beneath Yopo's lateral tree roots. So basically on one side of the tree, I dug down 0.5 metre and 3 metres across, and then on the other side, I dug down 1 metre and 6 metres across from the tree. And then as I was pulling up the root, the first thing I noticed was the root bark is definitely active. So you shine a UV light on that, that thing glows bright blue. When you smell it, there's a very exotic smell. So anyone that's smelt DMT, 5-MeO or Bufo will know that smell instantly when they smell it. I used an electric saw on it. I can tell you that the smoke that came off it was definitely active as well. Legend has it that you can make a brew out of it, but it's simply not a traditional thing. It's not the way the Piaroa would do it. I haven't actually heard of anyone successfully making a brew, but the chemistry and the ingredients are certainly there where it would be possible, okay? So yeah, this unusual relationship with the ants, so basically there's a cable, and then directly beneath that cable, the ants basically drill a tunnel roughly the same size as that cable, and then these cables running out for 6 metres basically in this fashion, and then when he needs water, he pushes up, creates cracks in the surface of the water, it rains, the water falls in there, and then when he's full, he then sinks those roots back down, which then closes the cracks up again. It's absolutely fascinating. He is extremely drought tolerant, so once established, you basically don't ever have to water him. I mean, I do. But this deep taproot is really one of his defining characteristics. So I've seen one of these taproots, they look like what are those white carrots called? They usually turn, right? Looks like that, really bulbous at the top, and then it comes down almost to this wispy thing. And the first 3 years of its life, there's no action happening up on top. All of his attention and energy is getting this taproot deep down. Once he finds the water, that's it. It's action non-stop up top. And like I said, very little caretaking required, other than maybe an annual haircut, which he seems to like. Another interesting phenomena I've observed is ants as seed planters. And so it's a phenomenon known as myrmecochory, and multiple ant species basically will find the seeds that have fallen on the ground, consume the outer coat, and then I've observed them carrying it very far away from the tree, so from my backyard all the way to the front yard, and then finding a crevice and then placing the seed in that crevice with the embryo facing in the earth, right? It's fascinating. So based on that, I developed a tech on how to grow Yopo purely just through observing Mother Nature. I was like, well, why reinvent the wheel? This obviously works. So how do I tie into that and create something? Because Yopo seeds are extremely difficult to grow. We all think, even people who have green thumbs, that, oh, you just stick the seed in the ground, cover it with soil and water it, right? Doesn't work like that. So we'll dig into that a little bit deeper as well. We've already spoken about the drought tolerance, but yeah, it's definitely one of the defining features. So especially here in Australia, it really loves Australian conditions. So you can easily grow Yopo anywhere from Byron Bay all the way up to the top end. For our brothers and sisters in the southern states, they have successfully grown it, but it just doesn't thrive. So for those people, I would suggest maybe looking at growing his brother. The brother likes the colder sort of region. People in Adelaide, South Australia, Melbourne, Sydney, for instance, maybe even Tasmania, this would be a really good option if you try to grow Yopo and it hasn't been successful. And the other interesting thing about this tree is that it's a living, moving tree. So the bipinnate leaves fold down inward at night and open again at dawn. We've spoken about the behaviour, it's called nyctinasty, and it's common across all Fabergé family. Yopo also tracks seasonal changes, so each year when the dry season approaches, he drops all of his leaves, and it's a bit of a pain. So if you could imagine, there's probably over 1 million of these little leaves on a tree, and so he just keeps dropping it. It's like dandruff coming out of this tree for a couple of days. Each of those little leaves that he drops are like tiny little batteries, and so as it hits the earth, water touches it and it just melts. And then what you instantly see, probably 2 to 3 days later, is this resilience. The green and all the plants around it start looking really green. Flowering starts occurring. Everything looks happy. It's almost like the plant standing upright. And so basically he does this process of dropping his leaves, but then fertilizing absolutely everyone around him. And then in wintertime, the reason he does this is to let more light into the neighbours. So there's not much light during wintertime. He's pretty much an umbrella. So once he drops that in, he's not starving his neighbours of that much needed sunshine during the winter months. When he comes back online, oh my God, it's amazing. It's just like this tree all of a sudden goes from something that looks pretty unhappy to just very vibrant, very bright. When the flowers are ready to get pollinated, you literally think there's a drone in your backyard. That is how noisy it's like. Every single bee, not just in your suburb, but in every surrounding suburb, has hit your tree all at the one time, and it's fascinating. I've never seen so many bees. And it basically does this massive pollination thing in one day. And then I get all excited because every flower I see, I know that when that drops off, it's going to become a seed pod, and in that seed pod are the seeds, okay?
So it's self-fertile?
Sorry?
It's self-fertile?
Yes, it is. Yep. And it also has relationship with animals that plant it on its behalf as well. So really, yeah, a lot of plants like cannabis has a very close symbiotic relationship with humans. Carver is another one. If humans don't continue to clone that plant, one generation and they stop doing that, that plant completely stops existing on Earth because it doesn't produce seed. So yeah, it's fascinating. So this is the growing Yopo from seed. This is something that I've worked on for a long time. I've tried every which way. This is the way that has the highest success rate out of any method. And again, it's basically copied from Mother Nature. I don't claim ownership of it. All I did was observe and copy and try and mimic the conditions. So 6-step process. On your seats, you'll find a Yopo seed. So that's your gift tonight. So that when you come home, you can actually grow a Yopo seed from scratch. And this will be the secret on how to do it. So the first thing when you pick up a Yopo seed, you want to have a look at it and you're going to feel it. You want to make sure they're intact, solid and feel fat. And when you go to flex it, there's no flexibility in it. So that means it's a solid seed. It's intact, no cracks, ready to rock and roll. When you look at the seed, you'll definitely notice on one of the edges something that looks like a V-shaped knot or a constriction, or you can see something's there. That's where the embryo is, right? So you definitely, when you do the scarification process, you don't want to touch that end at all. You want to go the opposite end, and you basically just want to do a semicircle scarification. So you just get your sandpaper and very gently do this motion, and you only want to take off literally 1 mil around the edge. Doesn't matter what grit, right? It's about the consciousness and the process of you doing it gently and softly and not rushing it. After that, you then simply soak it in a glass of water for 12 hours, preferably in a sunny windowsill, as it seems to help the process along. Hot tip, do not use tap water. If you use tap water, it'll completely stunt it. He sees our tap water as poison and he just won't grow, okay? So if you can, bottled spring water is the way to go. Rainwater is the ultimate, okay? So what you're doing here in this process of soaking is basically you're starting life. So the water is now penetrating in the scarification that you did. The embryo has now been switched on and now it starts sucking in water and swelling. While this is happening, you want to start preparing your soil. So I've put a diagram in here. So it's basically a tall forestry tube, because you remember it's got a long taproot, so you don't want anything that's short at all. You want something really, really long so that his taproot can just grow freely and not become stunted at any point. The top layer is 10% perlite. The second layer below that is fine cocoa core at 30%, and then below that is the coarse sand. Everything that's available at Bunnings is absolutely okay. Okay, so you can get all this stuff from Bunnings. It might cost you $20 to buy a bag of each. Okay, so with the deep forestry tube, once you do that, the key element is you want to make sure that it's moist but never waterlogged. So the biggest risk with Yopo is what's called seed rot. If you place a seed under the surface, seed rot will occur immediately. And as long as the temperature is between 25 to 35 degrees, which in Australia is pretty much any day of the week, you're good to rock and roll. And germination usually occurs within 5 to 14 days, but it is something you have to keep an eye on every single day. It's not something you do as a project and then you lose interest in it. You've got to visit that every single day to know when it's ready to rock and roll. So the sowing the seed, this is the secret. So just like you would push a coin into a coin slot, this is how you push the seed just into that perlite layer. And this time you want that little V-shaped notch pointed into the soil. And so the scarified part is at the top. Only half of it is in the perlite, the other half is out of the top. So the reason being for that is, again, no water retention. It's going to go completely through the perlite. It's going to be moist for a very short period of time, and then it's going to dry out. Never put a saucer under it. You don't want any water retention. You want to pour water on it and literally see it all flood out the bottom. That is literally the key to this. And by keeping it halfway out of the ground and halfway in the ground, it can still send its taproot down, but it's not going to succumb to root rot. And that's like I said, that's pretty much the main thing that you're fighting against. One of the other things I've noticed, if you know you've got 3 or 4 days of light rain ahead of you, that is the ultimate time to start this process. Why? You don't have to do anything. You literally put the seed in there, put it out, and Mother Nature does the rest for you. If you come out about 3 days later, you'll usually see a brand new baby growing. And so I've got a little one here. It's only a baby one. Yeah. So when it gets roughly to that size, that's when you want to plant it. It's a strange plant in that you want to plant it early in its permanent position. The reason being, if you leave him in there too long, he becomes stunted, and then just like sticking a teenage child in tiny size 4 shoes would be really uncomfortable. The same story is with him. So you want to get him out early. As far as where do you plant him, full sun. Like you can't give him enough sun. So he loves Australian conditions. The only thing I would suggest is that you probably want to plant him at least 6 meters away from your house or a structure. I've got him 3 meters next to my house, and like he hasn't damaged any concrete, he hasn't pushed up, he has gone into one pipe once just looking for water. But other than that, yeah, he doesn't really damage concrete or anything like that. He really just finds where the soil is and just works his way through it. So once that transplanting is complete, you just keep watering it daily. And like I said, you're probably going to have to baby him pretty much for the first year, right? It's like a baby. You've got to pay attention to it, see it pretty much every day, and be diligent with the watering. In the winter months, watering once a week is appropriate. In the summer months, you can go every single day. It's not a problem. The other thing I've found with him is you do not want to plant him in any place that is soggy. So he will die straight away. He hates what's called soggy roots. So if your water is collecting in a certain area, that's definitely not a good place to grow it. In the wild, you'll always find him growing on a rocky outcrop on a bit of a slope. So just something to keep in mind.